How's it going, guys? Cameron here with Canadian Gamer coming at you with another video. Hope you're all doing well. Just a quick video here. I wanted to talk about a game that I picked up very recently on the weekend at the flea market. And that's Vectorman 2 for the Sega Genesis. So the reason why I wanted to talk about this game was, as a lot of you guys know, back in the mid-90s, the Super NES had a huge resurgence when the Donkey Kong Country series came out, especially the first Donkey Kong Country, because at that time, you know, we started to hear more and more about these next gen consoles coming out, the PS1, the Sega Saturn, and even the N64. So when the Donkey Kong Country title came out, the first game, it sort of gave new life to the SNES. You know, it was not on life support by any means, but it was almost hard to believe what we were watching, because when Donkey Kong Country came out, you know, there were some people out there that were like more impressed with that game than what was being shown off for the new consoles that were yet to have been released at that point. So obviously, you know, I think it was a year later, Rare put out Donkey Kong Country 2, Diddy Kong's Quest. And I remember getting that game brand new for Christmas. And that was even better than the original. That was a fantastic game. And wow, what a game to have under the Christmas tree. Just opening up that box, all the rest of it. Well, obviously Sega was in competition with Nintendo at that time, right? The 16-bit wars. And it didn't take long for Sega to recruit Blue Sky Software to develop a game using 3D rendering, the same technique that was used in Donkey Kong Country and later in Toy Story and a few other games around that time as well. So 3D rendering, in a 2D game was all the rage around 1994 and 95. So when 1995 rolled around, Sega and Blue Sky Software released Vectorman for the Sega Genesis. And man, oh man, was that game ever a tour de force, especially as far as the graphics were concerned. To be able to see what a 3D rendered game looked on the Sega Genesis, even to this day, the original Vectorman holds up really well. Not only the graphics, but I know some people don't like Vectorman, but I think it's a really good game. I prefer it over Sonic the Hedgehog. And, you know, yes, it can be a difficult game, but a lot of what makes Vectorman unique is the levels are all about muscle memory. You need to get intimately involved with the levels and understand them like the back of your hand. And once you do, you'll get better and better and better, and you'll be able to get through the levels and then eventually beat the game. So it's a very rewarding experience. I never actually beat the original Vectorman, but I got pretty far into it, to be honest with you. So I'd like to go back and play that again and try to get to the end of it, because I know I can do it. I know if I put my mind to it, I can certainly accomplish it. So today we're talking about Vectorman 2, and this actually came out in 1996. So this came out a year after Donkey Kong Country 2, and a lot of gamers out there, journalists, had coined this as potentially being a Donkey Kong Country 2 killer. So today we're going to talk about whether or not that's what this is. So, very interesting. This came out in 96. At that point, the Saturn had been released. The PS1 was out, the N64. So this came out very late in the lifespan of the Sega Genesis, one of the later titles to be released. I've been on the hunt for this for such a long time. I used to have this on a Sega Genesis collection, and I don't like playing these games on an emulator on a modern TV. I don't. So that being said, put it on this afternoon, and I'm already able to get to level 5, which is good for me. I haven't gotten that far before in this game. It took a while. I think it was the second or third level. It's like a treetop level where you have to climb the tree, and it was frustrating. But once I got to understand what I was doing wrong and where to go and how to get through the level, I realized it's actually not that bad. And again, I hate to keep going back to graphics here, but man, this is one of the best looking Sega Genesis games of all time. Absolutely. It looks incredible. I would argue that this looks better than the first Vectorman. And, you know, to answer the question, is this a Donkey Kong Country 2 killer? Yeah, fuck it. It is. Donkey Kong Country 2 just doesn't really hold up like it used to. It's starting to get a bit long in the tooth, if I'm being honest. But this game here didn't get enough credit, not enough praise. Some people overlooked it. And now, going back and playing this in 2022 with a fresh set of eyes, it's refreshing to play this game. I didn't overplay it at any point in my life. Very difficult, very challenging, very rewarding gameplay. And the gameplay is not the same as Donkey Kong Country. Obviously, this is very different. I wouldn't even call this a run and gun. This is one where you have to methodically go through the level, but not take too much time because you've got a time limit. And you have to, with, you know, precision and care, think about where the enemy placement is and shoot the enemies accordingly. Because if you try to just run through this game like Sonic the Hedgehog, you're going to die really quickly. So you have to be very careful with where you're jumping and where you're shooting and planning your attack, if you will. So is it a Donkey Kong Country 2 killer? Abso-fucking-lutely. So if you haven't played Vectorman 2 and you're on the fence about it and you're not quite sure what it's about, I highly recommend seeking out a physical copy if you can find one in your area. I managed to pick this up for $15 and I absolutely do not regret it. And I'm going to continue to chip away at this game and get as far into it as possible. It's even up on speedrun.com, so there's an opportunity to post some high scores on there as well. So anyways, if you're curious about this game, do yourself a favor and check it out. You absolutely will not regret it. Ladies and gentlemen, the Donkey Kong Country 2 killer, Vectorman 2 from Blue Sky Software.